Okay, welcome to 604CH. Welcome to chapter 12. Welcome to equality, equality and sexuality. We're looking at women priests. We're looking at being gay. We're talking about egalitarianism and the Christian tradition. And you've got some dates to start you off on page 85 of 114 of our my lecture notes thing. One of the things I'm looking to talk about and to explore is the twofold evangelical way of looking at things, where we're not keen on women preaching. So that's the evangelical side of things. Anglo-Catholic side of things, where we're not keen on women presiding. And the ability of these two to come together and to form a powerful block that then stops the vote with regard to the ordination of women. We've seen earlier the call for Christian justice, and how deep-seated in that is also the call for equality. And what kind of equality would that look like with regards to the ordination of women? Then you've got the evangelicals just looking at this and going, this is a capitulation to secular pressure. And you've got the Anglo-Catholics, who would see that this is about, we've got a primary, integral, inherited order. Put the microphone away there for a moment. We've got an inherited church order, which we don't have permission to change. Roman Catholics haven't done it. The Orthodox haven't done it. Why should we do it? The church is to be one. That was Jesus's prayer. And in us doing this, we are separating ourselves further. We're making it harder for us to be one with the church as a whole. So we are. Just before we move to Australia, we're looking at how it is possible for an evangelical to hold a position of being pro the ordination of women, but against, say, gay marriage or the ordination of gays, whereas it would be acceptable for an Anglo-Catholic. And you've got to bear in mind the traits, generalizations that I'm working with here. For an Anglo-Catholic to be against the ordination of women to the priesthood, and yet pro the acceptance of gay marriage and of the ordination of homosexuals. So you've got to be able to sort of hold these balances. By the end of the century, to a large extent, we're going to see the acceptance of women as priests across Protestant denominations and across Anglicans throughout Europe, North America, Australasia, increasingly common in Asia, Africa, Latin America. So increasingly we're going to see that block. Okay. So to 12.2, the ordination of women in Australian Anglicanism. And here what we see, mild red herring, but I think it's quite an interesting one to explore. Halfway down page 86, it's really in the wrong place. Never mind. About Austrian Catholics in 1995 calling for women, for the church to explore the ordination of women. And the Amazon Synod of 2019. I think both of those are two issues in the Catholic Church that challenge and invite an exploration of this, and be interesting to hear more on that. What we've got in Australia is we've got these 5 provinces, and in order to have a major constitutional change, the vote needs to be carried by all 5 metropolitan sees. So it's got to be carried in the majority of dioceses in this way. But you've still got a block. The evangelicals and the Catholics are still able to come together and to form this powerful block. This leads eventually to a couple of dioceses going, stuff it, we're just going to go our own way and do our own thing. And that results in Sydney diocese going, well, what if we didn't? You stay there. We're the ones who should withdraw, because we seem to be the only ones who seem to be blocking this. Why don't we withdraw? But part of the problem there is that the Sydney diocese, that's where 70% of the money is for running the Australian Anglican Church. So you really don't want that to happen. Or to just say, again, as a red herring, perhaps, that remains a bit of an issue for for the Church of England generally. To some extent, we are persuaded by the people with the money, and so where you've got sizable churches in England who are against certain proposals by General Synod, you do end up listening to them, because if they do decide that this is an issue that where they're going to walk, then you got to hear what they're saying and really think through, is this of God, and do we want to do this? So it becomes quite an issue. You'll find that for yourselves when you're just running your own little church, and somebody does or doesn't want this such and such the thing to happen, and you'll find yourself having to weigh that up for yourself. So finally, what ends up happening is that the Australian churches say, look, we're going to give powers to the different dioceses, sort it out amongst yourselves rather than as a whole. And so you end up without a formal schism. So you end up with a schism, but it's not really a formal one. So we come to 12.3 and debates over gay rights and the American churches. I don't know if you're old enough to remember HIV/AIDS, remember the talk of it as being God's judgment on gay people. This comes up again and again, usually in different shades and forms. I think there was one quite recently about COVID-19 being a judgment from God about gay people. So there you go. It hasn't gone away as a simple thought. The thing is that with this sort of vote, if we go down this way, we liberal Western types, if we do this, what are the implications for our brothers and sisters elsewhere? Diarmaid MacCulloch picks up on this argument, where there's this concern for African Christians who are in danger of being ridiculed or worse, but says Diarmaid MacCulloch. And so this is the sort of thing that makes us reticent to go ahead with a proposal or a vote. When we finally do get around to meeting, do ask me to talk more about the General Synod's proposal to not take note back in February of 2016, which then produced the Living in Love and Faith report, which is supposed to conclude in July of 2020. Yeah, that won't happen. Bottom of page 88, 1957. I think that should say the Wolfenden report. I think I've spelled that wrong. But here we discover how the Church of England was at the forefront of pushing for decriminalisation of homosexuality in England. Got a bit of stick for it, but the church was at the forefront of that. San Francisco stuff I rather liked. I didn't know this stuff. This phrase, "Are you a friend of Dorothy?" As coming from The Wizard of Oz, Judy Garland discovering herself as a gay icon because of the character that she played that was fully accepting of people of personal difference. The song "Somewhere Over the Rainbow" likewise being probably the reason why the rainbow becomes the flag for gay pride. Stonewall Inn, a gay bar in San Francisco that's raided in 1969, and that's likely to be where the name for the charity came from. So I didn't know those bits. The process of the churches as they develop, you've got a process of culture as it considers, is this a choice? Is this an eccentric thespian sort of thing? Or is this psychological, psychopathic sort of psychiatric disorder? What is it? Is it genetic, and so on? All those discussions, and we see society have that discussion through towards the end of the 20th century. I think to some extent, every now and then it still bobs up as a discussion. But what we also see is the churches, and the churches, Roman Catholics, for example, very clear. 1986, Joseph Ratzinger, very clear. The American Anglicans, so the Episcopalians, or ECUSA, presumably Episcopal Church in America, and we see them being quite generous as time goes by in terms of who they will include. But there's a danger that this is going to affect the broader Anglican Church, particularly at the Lambeth Conference sessions. And so there's a concern here to close this down. So the evangelicals are pulling in their networks from West and East Africa, from Singapore, to resist this growing liberal voice. Meanwhile, the Methodists with a substantial liberal constituency, nonetheless ruled that homosexuality is incompatible with Christian teaching. That being said, in 2019, July of, I think that they said that gay marriage is okay. Now, I went onto the Methodist website, and the implication there is that there will be a report in July of 2020 saying that gay marriage is okay. Well, we'll see what the report says. But I'm confused because I feel sure that July of last year there was a settled view on this. So now I'm not so clear in my mind quite where we're at with that. We see how this is to do with the balance of human rights over the balance of historic Christian tradition, and how we hold and weigh these things. Back in 1991, there was the House of Bishops ruling on paper Issues on Human Sexuality, and there being homosexual was described as not ideal. Now, with the Take Note, or rather the Not Take Note debate, which launched the Living in Love and Faith resource, and that's coming to a head in July of 2020. We will see what that produces. What it won't produce is the key question that everyone is asking, which is, can I marry a gay couple? And to which the answer is, that's not the question that we're looking at. To which we're all going, oh, it's a shame because we thought it was. It's not the question we're looking at. Instead, what LLF is looking at is, who are we as people? How do we think about ourselves? As an identity, as a sexual being? How do we explore that? How do we then relate to others in that regard, and how does that all connect? Anyway, we'll talk more on that, I hope, anon.